All Hoops Podcast.
Okay, so we're diving into this AP News article today. It's about Kawhi Leonard, the LA Clippers star, and the tough choice he had to make when those wildfires ripped through the LA area.
Yeah, they were raging pretty bad.
Yeah, the Clippers were actually in the middle of a game playing in Denver when it all went down.
Yeah.
And he decided, I got to get back home. I got to be with my family.
It's wild, right? I mean, it really puts things into perspective. This is a guy at the top of his game, and suddenly basketball takes a back seat.
Totally. The article mentions that his coach, Tyronn Lue, was completely understanding about it. He was basically like, family first, no question.
It makes you think about the pressure these guys must face, though, It's not like they can just clock out when something like this happens.
Exactly. Like, imagine you're Kawhi Leonard. You got this massive natural disaster going on. Your family's safety is up in the air, but you've also got this whole career, the expectations of fans, the team.
Must be a whirlwind of emotions. And remember, he had just gotten back on the court after being out for 34 games.
Oh, right. He had that knee injury.
Yeah, so he had only played a couple of games before all this happened. It's like, talk about bad timing.
You mentioned perspective earlier, and that's what I keep coming back to. It's not just a sports story, right? It's a human story.
Absolutely. And it's not just happening to him, The article mentions that the Denver Nuggets, the team they were playing, they were dealing with their own stuff too. Nikola Jokic, their star center, he was out sick for the game.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even these athletes, who we often see as like superhuman, are dealing with real life, just like the rest of us.
It's all connected somehow. Actually, this whole situation made me think about the bigger picture, the whole wildfire thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They're becoming more and more frequent and more intense, and not just in California. It's like a global issue now.
Scary. And it makes climate change feel so much more real,
Yeah.
Like, it's not just this abstract idea anymore. It's impacting people's lives directly.
It's like a wake-up call. It forces us to think, are we prepared for this? As individuals, as communities, as a planet, what can we actually do? What sacrifices might we have to make?
It's heavy stuff.
It really is. It makes you think about, what can we actually do to get ready for something like this? These wildfires, I mean.
Yeah.
Because it's not just California anymore, right?
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin? What are the most important steps to take to be prepared for a wildfire?
Well, first things first, I guess you got to understand the risks where you live. Are you in a wildfire zone?
Right.
Do you know the evacuation routes? And I don't mean just like a general idea. I mean, like, could you get out in the dark, under pressure with smoke everywhere?
It's one thing to know the routes there. It's another to actually use it when you need to.
Exactly. And then there's the practical stuff. What do you have ready to go if you need to evacuate, like right now?
Yeah, what about that? What should people have packed and ready to go?
The go bag. That's crucial. But it's not just like throwing random stuff in a backpack. You got to be smart about it. Essential medications, copies of important documents, a change of clothes, emergency supplies, all that has to be ready to grab, like, in a split second.
Like a fire drill, but for wildfires.
Exactly.
Speaking of drills, does it make sense to actually, practice the evacuation plan with the family?
Totally. Make sure everyone knows the plan, where to meet, how to communicate if you get separated, especially if you've got kids. You practice it regularly, and when, God forbid, the worst happens, everyone knows what to do. Less panic,
Makes sense. So we've covered the whole getting ourselves ready thing. But what about our homes? Anything we can do to make them more resistant to fire damage?
Yeah, you're talking about home hardening. And honestly, it can make a huge difference. One of the biggest things is creating what they call defensible space around your property, like a buffer zone between your house and anything that could catch fire.
So like clearing away brush, trimming trees, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. You want to get rid of anything flammable within about 100 feet of your house. And don't forget the gutters, man.
Oh, right.
Keeping those clean, free of leaves and debris, that can stop embers from setting your roof on fire.
So many things you can do to be proactive. We've talked a lot about the physical stuff, but what about the mental and emotional side of this? Dealing with a wildfire, I mean, That's got to be traumatic.
Oh, absolutely. It's scary. It's stressful. You've got the fear, the uncertainty, the potential of losing everything. It takes a toll, So taking care of your mental health during and after a wildfire, it's just as important as all the physical preparations.
So what can people do to cope with all that stress and anxiety?
Talk to someone you trust. A friend, a family member, a therapist, whoever you feel comfortable with. Don't keep it all bottled up inside.
Get it out there.
Right. And connecting with others who've gone through the same thing, that can be huge. Support groups, community forums, those can be incredibly helpful. It's like a burden shared is a burden halved, you know? And don't underestimate the power of just, taking care of yourself. Exercise, meditation, spending time in nature. Those things can do wonders for your mental well-being, especially when you're stressed out.
So it sounds like being prepared for a wildfire isn't just about the practical stuff. It's about mental resilience, too.
It's both. When you're mentally and emotionally prepared, you're going to be able to think more clearly under pressure, make better decisions. And that can be the difference between, life and death in a crisis.
So we've covered awareness, having a plan, making your home safer, taking care of yourself mentally and emotionally. Anything else people should keep in mind, like when it comes to wildfire preparedness, I mean?
Stay informed, I think. That's the big one. Pay attention to weather reports, fire warnings, evacuation orders. Don't wait until the last minute to react. And check on your neighbors, especially if you've got older folks or people who might need extra help.
It's about the community, right? Looking out for each other.
For sure.
We've talked about what individuals can do, but this whole situation with Kawhi, Leonard, and the wildfires, it really makes you think about the bigger picture.
You thinking climate change?
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that doing our part individually is important, but it can feel kind of small when you're talking about a global crisis like this. What can we do collectively to actually address the root of the problem?
That's the million-dollar question, right? There's no easy answer. But we know we got to transition away from fossil fuels. We got to invest in renewable energy, reduce our carbon footprint, all that.
So it's about changes in our everyday lives,
Yeah.
but also pushing for bigger systemic changes.
Yeah, it's a two-pronged approach. Driving less, conserving energy, reducing waste, all those little things add up. But we also got to be advocating for policies that promote sustainability, support businesses that are environmentally responsible, and hold our leaders accountable, make sure they're actually doing something.
A multi-pronged approach. I like that. Individual action, collective action, systemic change.
Right. It's a global challenge, so it needs a global response. But it starts with each of us making those choices every day and using our voices to demand change.
This has been a really insightful conversation. We've covered a lot, from the immediate crisis of these wildfires to the bigger issue of climate change and what we can do about it. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, but I also feel
empowered.
Yeah, like we can actually make a difference if we work together.
That's the spirit. It's easy to feel helpless when you think about how big this problem is, but we're not powerless. We can all be agents of change,
Before we move on, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on. We've talked about being prepared, taking action, being resilient, all that. But what about hope?
Hope.
Yeah, I mean, how do we stay hopeful when we're facing such massive challenges?
That's a great question, and one that I think deserves a whole other deep dive.
We were talking about hope, right, and how important it is when we're dealing with these huge issues like climate change and wildfires.
Yeah, it's easy to get bogged down in all the negativity. But finding that hope, that's what keeps us going.
It can't just be passive hope, though, right? Like, it's got to lead to action.
Exactly. It has to be an active kind of hope.
Yeah.
I think, for me, what makes it real is realizing we're not in this alone. There are millions of people out there fighting for a better future. Scientists, activists, policymakers, regular people. It's a whole global movement, and that's powerful.
There's power in numbers, for sure. But how do we actually tap into that?
Well, I think it starts with finding your people, your tribe, that community of like-minded folks who get it, who share your concerns and your desire to make things better. Connecting with people who are actively working towards solutions, it gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. It helps you fight off that feeling of being alone, of feeling helpless.
Like we said before, you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. But it's not just about teaming up, is it? It's also about how we talk about this whole thing, about climate change.
You're right. We need to change the narrative. Instead of doom and gloom, we need to focus on solutions, on what's possible. I mean, yeah, the situation is urgent, the challenges are huge, but there's also so much good happening. Communities coming together to build resilience. Businesses coming up with new technologies to reduce their impact. Young people leading the way on climate justice. We need to highlight those stories, celebrate those wins, no matter how small they might seem.
Because those wins, those steps forward, they fuel that sense of hope,
Yeah.
right? And they inspire more action.
Absolutely. It's about realizing that change is happening, that progress is being made, and that we can all be a part of it.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. We started with Kawhi Leonard's choice to be with his family during the wildfires, which got us thinking about the very real human impact of these increasingly frequent and intense events. We talked about climate change, how complicated it is, and what we can actually do about it, both as individuals and as a society. And now we're talking about hope, about finding that sense of purpose and agency when we're facing such a massive global challenge.
And the great thing is there's room for everyone in this movement. It doesn't matter if you're a scientist coming up with new technology, an activist raising awareness, an entrepreneur building a sustainable business, or just someone making more conscious choices in their daily life. We all have a part to play.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What small act of hope will you choose today? How will you contribute to a brighter, more sustainable future? Will you reach out to a friend who's struggling? Will you donate to an environmental organization? Will you just choose to see the good in the world? It's up to you.
And remember, every act of hope, no matter how small, it makes a difference. It ripples outward and helps create a better future for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.